Today is 3/7/2020, and in this video I'm going to do a narrative about the enemy, the unseen war, virtually unseen, but of course we see its fruit. And this war has been going on for about 6,000 years. Okay? Now I know I talk pretty slow, so I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. And I know I'm not perfect, so I may make mistakes. This is, like I said, just a rough draft, but I believe it's going to be the best narrative you can get to help your understanding about the past, present, and future. Okay? So, I'll start off with the date. Today's date. The current date is the 21st day of the 12th month, which is the final month of the year, of the 7th year, which is the final year of the week, of the 7th week, which is the final week of the Jubilee, and of the 120th Jubilee, which is the final Jubilee of the age, 3/7/2020. 3 sevens equals 21. Thought that was pretty interesting. So, a few things to understand to help the perspective. The first thing is that this narrative has to be viewed from a Judeo-Christian perspective concerning the Most High, One True Almighty, YaHushuWaH, the one who is, the one who was, the one who always will be. That He is the most supreme being, there's none like Him, He's the creator of all, nothing would exist without Him, completely dominant to all. Like, nothing comes close to Him. Because when you look at the ancient religions, they really don't have a supreme. It's all basically gods that are virtually equal. Another perspective is that Enoch was the original prophet. Okay? Reason being is that Adam sinned, then Cain sinned. Alright? And then the Almighty tells us that He visits the iniquity of the fathers down 4 generations. So Cain was the 2nd generation, so now he has to visit down 4. So then you got the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th is where his visiting ends. And then the 7th generation's Enoch, and that's when he begins communicating in power again to humans via Enoch. And basically most prophecies all throughout Scripture are confirming what the Almighty and the angels laid out to Enoch. And that was 1,000 years prior to the oldest ancient religions, which most people say is the Sumerians and the Akkadians, which are basically one and the same as far as their religions. And Enoch was 1,000 years prior to them. And this is the perspective that the ancient alien, ancient astronaut theorists get wrong. Alright? Because when you have this perspective, and when you know what Enoch tells us, then it's very clear that the ancient religions were taught by the fallen ones. Thus, their deception. Because they're acting like they're the bosses, and it's not true. Yes, they were bossing around humanity, but they're not the ultimate supreme, which is the Almighty. Then another perspective is that the Almighty wrote this in the stars billions of years prior to it playing out. Because scientists predict the age of the universe to be about 14 billion years old. And as we spoke about in past videos, it's not day one, a literal day from sunrise to sunset. It's speaking of an age, the rising and setting of an age. The Hebrew word that the translators mistranslated as day is just a space of time. Okay? And the Almighty created the earth in the first age, and then he didn't create the sun, moon, and stars until the fourth age, billions of years after the earth. And when he did create the sun, moon, and stars, he created it from a perspective of earth, from earth, and then he wrote in the stars that he created a play that would play out in reality billions of years in the future. Try to wrap your brain around that, how smart that is, okay? And then humans were created in the sixth age, and they were here for hundreds of thousands of years before Adam and Eve was brought into the garden and transformed. Okay. Now the other perspective is that the fallen ones, the rebel ones, are more advanced in knowledge than humans. Okay. And I put this together. Like I said, I'm not 100% on exactly how this occurs, but when you research about angels, nobody seems to have a crystal clear understanding. And I think seraphim and cherubim and ophanim, I don't think it's a good idea to try to get wrapped up in those terms, because it just seems like they are almost pointing to the same things. So I think Jubilees gives us the best, clearest explanation, and that there's angels of presence, angels of sanctification, angels that do the work of controlling the sun, moon, and stars, enforcing the laws of physics, matter, energy, etc. Angels that control the weather, and then the angels that do like the groundwork, governing the creatures, nature, and assisting humans, the guardian angels. All right. And then I put this little order together just to show what they're doing, where they're at, and the fallen ones and the rebel ones originated from the guardian angel order. Okay, so they have spiritual knowledge of heaven and earth, meaning they're advanced to us. And it was easy to see because it took humans 200,000 years, and their biggest achievements was clay pottery and carved arrowheads. Stone tools. 200,000 years, and their achievement was clay pottery and stone tools. Okay? Then all of a sudden the fallen ones descend, and they go from stone tools to metalworking and building cities within less than 1,000 years. So that it's just a basic proof that the fallen ones are advanced in knowledge to us, because they taught us pretty much all advancements throughout human history. Okay? So, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans were here in the sixth age. And the Almighty, when He created humans, gave them dominion on the earth. And this is still considered the sixth age. The sixth, there's hundreds of thousands of years that are going on. It's still considered the sixth age. Then, in 3980 BC, because the Apollyon deceived Adam and Eve in 3973 BC, in the second month on the 17th day, which was the second week. So then we subtract 7 years from 3973 BC, and we get 3980, which is when the Almighty brought Adam into the garden and transformed him from caveman into made in the image of the Almighty. Okay. Now, this video isn't meant to discuss about what that means, made in the image of the Almighty. We just need to know that he was transformed into the image of the Almighty, and it separated him from cavemen. All right. And during the time he was in Eden, and here's my cheesy drawing of Earth and possibly how it's laid out. So humans are up here, and like I did the past video, I believe Eden is within the core of the Earth. All right, and there's either gateways that are physical that attach to Eden, where you can go up and down, or they are portals. I don't know which, but anyway, there's some type of gateway where Adam and Eve were brought by the angels to Eden, and then eventually they got kicked out. Okay. So when Adam and Eve were in Eden, they weren't on the crust of the earth. They were in Eden, and it's separated from the crust of the earth. Okay. When they were in Eden for them 7 years, they were being taught by the angels, and it was the guardian angels, that same order. And the leader of either all of the guardian angels or a portion was what we refer to as the Antichrist. We really don't know his name. All the names given to him are basically descriptions of him. So we have the Antichrist, Apollyon, the Beast, Azazel, Gadriel, son of perdition, the destroyer, son of destruction, man of sin, man of lawlessness, the rebel, and on and on and on. So for convenience, I'm going to refer to him as either the Antichrist or Apollyon, because that's who it is in the New Testament, which is speaking about the near future. So for 7 years, Adam and Eve were in Eden, and the tradition is that they were made to be, when they were transformed, they were made to be like the angels, very glorious, very beautiful. And the Antichrist, Apollyon, was jealous of them because he viewed them as inferior, made from the earth, where him and his angels came from heaven. Okay? So, one thing to understand is that during this time, the 7 years, Adam and Eve were dealing with the guardian angels, what we would call the guardian angels, because they were teaching them. They were teaching how to garden, how to work this, to grow fruit and stuff like that in Eden, and they were teaching them things. So we know that they were interacting, okay, for 7 years. And I guess during that time, it was building and building within Apollyon, his jealousy, and then he decided to act upon it. Because even though he may have been thinking, this actual sin did not occur until he acted upon it. And his action was when he deceived Adam and Eve. Okay? Now, the reason why I'm saying all this is because, like I said in past videos, I do not believe that he came in the form of a serpent. It is a possibility, but I don't believe it. Reason being is because Adam and Eve, yes, they were naive because they're new. They're only 7 years old, basically. Yes, they were naive, but I would think if a serpent came talking to them, they would be suspicious. But the fact that it was he was probably in his angelic form, but the Almighty just calls him a serpent because it explains a few things. Kind of like when the Messiah referred to the teachers of the law as vipers. Right? They're not literal vipers. He's just referring to them as that because they're poisonous. Same principle. Serpent is not, he's not actually a serpent. It was describing something. Okay? So I believe that he came in his angelic form, which, if you look at the ancient sculptures, and these are ancient sculptures, it would have been like this. Okay? This is an ancient sculpture of Marduk, which I believe is the Apollyon, the original rebel, the Antichrist. And he was the leader of either all the guardian angels or a portion. But he was a leader. Okay? And Adam and Eve were probably dealing with them during them 7 years. They were probably dealing with them. So they weren't suspicious when he came to deceive them. That's my point. Alright? Now, when he deceived them, Adam and Eve, they were in their glorified bodies, which would be probably equivalent to what we receive when we enter New Jerusalem, and what the Messiah received after he was raised from the dead. Okay? They were in their glorified bodies, but when they sinned, they were stripped of the glory and made back into flesh. And when the Antichrist, Apollyon, when he did this, and the Almighty came and judged them, same thing happened. He got stripped of his glory, which is the ability to move about like the angels. They can manipulate energy because they are pure energy, so they can, be like lightning 1 second and then the next second in a human body. Well, he was able to do that prior to his sin. But when he sinned, just like Adam and Eve got stripped of their glory and put in the flesh, he got stripped of his glory and he got put in the flesh. All right? And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was, but whatever reason, this is the flesh body that he got put into when he got kicked out of the garden and made into flesh, stripped of the glory. And even a better ancient carving is this one right here, which shows him with the scorpion tail. And then when you look at the Revelation 9, the entities that come out of the abyss, they are in his form, because some of them are his children. Okay? That's what I wanted to get across, is that when humans and the rebel angels, when they rebel, they get stripped of the glory and put into flesh. They can no longer manipulate energy like the holy angels. They are literally in flesh, just like us. The only thing that separates them is they are much smarter and they are much more advanced. Okay. So when you compare this to the Sumerian scripts, all right, the Anunnaki, Anu they refer to as their supreme god, who was stationed in the north parts of space, which is, long story short, is that they came from Draco, the constellation Draco, from the north parts of space, the serpent, which is why I believe the Almighty referred to him as the serpent, because of Draco. All right? And they're pretty much, their main god is Marduk, which I showed you. This individual, this entity. Okay? Notice how much bigger he is than the humans. Okay? But he is also the same thing as Baal. Baal is just the same. It's the same entity, just in a later period. So the Babylonians referred to him as Baal instead of Marduk. But it's basically the first one that deceived Adam and Eve. Apollyon. Alright? So Baal, Marduk, basically the main pagan entity is the original rebel. And he was stripped of the glory and put into this body of flesh. So after Eden, he was stuck on the earth in a body of flesh, but extremely smart. Okay? So, what I believe he did immediately after he got forced out of Eden and was stuck on the earth is I believe he started enslaving the cavemen. Because at this point in time, there's hundreds of thousands of cavemen on earth. Only Adam and Eve were made into the image, and then they only had Cain, Abel, and Seth, and you know the bloodlines then. But at this time, there are still hundreds of thousands of cavemen. So I believe what he did immediately was start enslaving them and building an empire with them. Then fast forward to the birth of Cain and Abel. Abel kills Cain. A couple hundred years go by. Abel kills Cain. And during this period, Adam and Eve and their children, their family, they're basically, they don't leave a certain area, which I believe is probably Mount Hermon. Okay. Okay, so here's Mount Hermon over in Middle East. Okay. It's either Mount Hermon, Mount Zion, or Mount Sinai. It's in one of the mountains that the Almighty refers to his places. Okay, and they remain like basically nomads in that area. They don't mingle with the cavemen, is what I'm saying. Okay, but when Cain sinned and killed Abel, he got banished. And if you notice that he was immediately paranoid, which is what guilt causes, but anyway, he was paranoid that he was going to be killed. Well, who would kill him? The antichrist, Apollyon, and his enslaved cavemen, their empire. That's who would kill him, because he's getting banished from the area of where Adam and his family were. Whether it's here or down here, I'm not sure exactly where, but I do know that the tradition says is that they were on a holy mountain, and that in the valley is where Cain's people eventually went and settled. And Seth and Cain's families did not mix Okay, Adam forbade it. And then, of course, Cain was feared for his life because he knew he would be killed. And then he got a mark put on him. Now, what did that mark do? That mark let Apollyon know that he couldn't kill him. So what I believe happened is that because they couldn't kill him, Apollyon met with Cain and set up an alliance. All right, and I believe this is where the feudal system began, with Apollyon being the emperor, the king, and Cain and his family being the nobility, and then the cavemen being the peasants, the slaves, etc. All right, and the reason why I say this is because when you look at the scripture, when Cain got kicked out of the area of Adam's family, he had one child, and it says he built a city. So why would you need to build a city if you only have one child? Simple. Because he's aligned with the Antichrist, and they have enslaved cavemen, and the Antichrist probably made Cain as the manager. Okay. The nobility. The, the controllers. So, Cain's seed becomes in alliance with the Antichrist and his empire building. Okay, now they're doing it together. And somewhere along the line, the Antichrist begins having children. Whether that was the agreement, Cain gives him one of his daughters or sisters or something, I don't know. Or whether it was in the future when the 200 do it, whether it was all at the same time, I don't know. It's hard to distinguish. But he eventually does have children. More than likely, he would want to have them with Cain's seed. But anyway, the tradition is that Seth and Cain's seed never mingled, so they were separated. Seth was in the mountains, Cain was in the valley. Okay, now, why would the 200 angels, why would they descend on the Mount Hermon? Simple. Because they are guardian angels. Okay? The Antichrist and Cain are building an empire. Seth's seed, which Adam made to promise that he would not mingle with Cain, Seth's seed is separated like nomads on the top of a mountain, or you know what I mean, in the mountain ranges. They're nomads, just a few of them. How could they stand up against an empire that's being built in the desert valley next to them? They can't, which is why the 200 were sent to protect them and to teach them in proper judgments and the ways of the law. That's why the original 200 were sent as guardians, protectors. And that's what they were supposed to do. But what happened? I believe that the Antichrist, Apollyon, the first thing he started teaching the cavemen and Cain was war, the art of war, how to make weapons of war, metalworking, which is why we see Tubal Cain as the ones to work metal, and etc., etc. Instruments of destruction. Okay? And then he also taught women how to make themselves beautiful with makeup and all that stuff. Okay? And the reason why he did that was to seduce the 200. Because he knew, because he was one of them once, he knew their weaknesses. He knew how to deceive them. And this is the way he went, and it worked. Because the 200 were probably witnessing Seth and his children and thought that it was cool that humans have children that look just like them, and they were probably thinking, yeah, that would be cool for me to have a little mini me. And Apollyon, the Antichrist, knew this, knew how to deceive them. So he taught women how to make themselves beautiful with makeup and jewelry and all that stuff. More than likely, it was mostly Cain's children. Or the cavemen. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that somehow, whether he had a meeting with them or they just came down out of curiosity, they came down, got tempted, and they made a pact among themselves. Whether or not the Antichrist was with them or not, he was probably saying, this is the best. I'm in this flesh body, but it's awesome, blah, blah, blah. I have kids, or I want to have kids and take a wife just like the humans. Whatever it was, he deceived them, he tricked them. They fell for it. They made a pact, which I believe was that the pact was that they wanted to be flesh. And they took it to Michael, and they were removed of their glory and became flesh. And when they did that, that's when they took wives, and that's when they sinned. Okay? And then when you listen to the way Enoch describes their physical appearance, it's the same as him. He doesn't say they have wings, though, or anything like that. He says the upper half is men, the lower half is horses, centaurs. Okay? So, when they fell for it, when they got deceived, my point is that their glory was stripped also. This is the reoccurring theme. The glory stripped. They become flesh. They're no longer able to manipulate energy. They're no longer able to ascend into New Jerusalem. They are stuck to the earth. They're in flesh, just like we are. Just smarter. Okay? Now, a perfect example of how, even though they're smarter than us, they're nowhere near as smart as the Almighty, is because they didn't have the foresight to know that their children would turn out to be giants, bloodthirsty maniacs. They didn't know that. They just thought they were going to have mini-me's. Children that looked like them, just like the humans. They didn't have the foreknowledge that their children would come out as bloodthirsty giants that were going to end up killing humans and eating them. Okay? And that is what stirred up the Almighty, was the innocent blood crying out up to the gates of heaven. And that's when Michael went to the Almighty, and that's when the Almighty pronounced judgment. So, and when you see how the fallen ones, and now we're talking about Apollyon the Antichrist and the other 200, with Semyaza as the leader, because since the Antichrist rebelled, he was no longer the leader, so the Almighty appointed Semyaza as the new leader. And then Semyaza did the same thing. He rebelled also, and the 200 made a pact to agree with each other, and they ended up all rebelling. And the Antichrist and the 200 were together, and they were pleading to the Almighty to have mercy on them. Okay? And one of the things they requested was that their children would live forever, not be killed. And when you see how harsh of a judgment that the Almighty gives to them, it's terrifying. And even Michael, who is the top angel, the archangel, the four angels of the altar are the highest level, but Michael is their leader. So basically, has the most authority, so to speak, amongst all angels. And when you listen to how he explains it, and you can tell that the judgment was very strict. And Michael says, "Whose heart can't be melted by the judgment that was passed?" So it just goes to show you that you shouldn't mess with the Almighty, because if you think about it, if you put it in perspective, the angels were with him for billions of years. Billions of years they were with the Almighty, because he made them in day one, age one. And then they disobeyed him. They were the first ones to break the law being his word. He is the creator, thus his word is law. And they were not supposed to mix with humans. And then he goes on explaining to Enoch why he didn't make wives for the angels, and etc., etc. But long story short, he cast judgment on them. And the judgment was that their children are not going to live forever, but their lifespan is only going to be 500 years, and then they're going to kill each other. And the fallen ones are going to have to witness it. So they're going to be alive, still on earth, the time that their children are killing each other. And that's exactly what happens. And then he says that they're going to be bound for 70 generations and then released for the final judgment. So that's exactly what happened, because let's see, who was it? So the Almighty commands Raphael to bind the antichrist and cast him into the abyss. And then he commands Gabriel to give the giants a sword, which causes them to kill each other. And then he commands Michael to bind the 200 and cast them into the abyss. Okay? So Raphael binds the leader, which I believe that this ancient statue is actually Raphael binding the original rebel, Apollyon, the Antichrist, Azazel, Gadriel. Right? It's not Hercules binding the centaur. It's actually Raphael binding the original rebel. Okay. So the judgment's passed, and this is during the days of Jared. So that's how we can figure out the timing of this, because it all occurs within the days of Jared, and then Noah is alive at the same time. So Jared and Noah, there's only a short period there, which pinpoints the timing. Okay? And that's when the giants kill each other. The fallen ones witness it, and then the fallen ones get bound in the abyss for 70 generations. And a generation 70 years, so 70 times 70 is 4,900 years. And then the prophecy of the 70 weeks, it is actually the final 7 generations. That's what the prophecy is about. The final 7 generations. The 490 years of the end. The final 7 generations. And then after that is the completion of the desolations, which is when they trample Jerusalem under feet for the final week. Okay? So they get locked up. Now, for 70 generations, which is 4,900 years, and which is approximately 2,874 BC is when they got locked up. Because the flood was around 2600 BC, and they were already locked up prior to that. And then after, and like I said, I believe when the Antichrist Apollyon started enslaving the cavemen, and I believe that was the beginning of the tyrannical feudal system, right? Which is what our founding fathers left and made America with the Constitution. Because the modern day feudal system is called globalism. You know, I know globalism sounds like, oh yeah, it sounds cool. Everybody in a global community working together. But that's deception. Globalism is nothing more than the modern day feudal system, with a certain few ruling over the masses. That's all it is. Okay? And this is so then the Almighty decides that he's going to cleanse the earth with the flood, and only Noah and his children are going to be the progenitors of humanity after that point. Okay? So, a short time after the flood, we had Ham and his mother have offspring, which is Canaan. All right, so Canaan is the result of incest, which is another huge violation of the law. And that's why cursed be Canaan, whose father is Ham. That's where that comes from, all right? And then we've seen that Canaan is the first one to violate the sacred oath of boundaries, all right? Because for whatever reason, I'm sure there's an explanation for it, but Nimrod went the way of Cain, went the way of conquest, and started conquering and consolidating power over the whole earth, known earth at the time, okay? And then the demons, which are the spirits of the dead giants, they were afflicting mankind, and they were showing Nimrod what to do. And then they influenced Nimrod to try to build a tower, which is really a portal, a gate, to try to make a portal to get to heaven. Whether it was New Jerusalem or another planet, I'm not 100% sure, but that's what they were doing. They were trying to build a portal. All right? And that's when the Almighty divided the nations. And this is why it's so critical that we have nation states. And I know a lot of people are like anti-nationalism, but nationalism is actually a principle of Scripture. Because the Almighty is the one that separated us into nations, and it was for a specific purpose. Because Nimrod consolidated power over all of humanity at the time. And the nation state is what keeps that same tyrannical form of feudalism from controlling the whole earth again. Because, you know, even though there are portions of the earth that are under tyrannical authoritarians, there's always other places that you can go, or other places that stand up to them. Like, for instance, World War II, when Hitler was trying to take over the world, but the allies stood up to him and defeated him. All right. That's what the nation state is for, is to keep a tyrannical world system from emerging. However, that's what has been trying to go on since the flood, because the demons were influencing Nimrod, okay, and they were afflicting humans, and Noah went to the angels and pleaded his case and said that the demons, the spirits of the dead giants, are afflicting my children, and that, you know, something needs to be done. And this is when the Almighty decided to have them locked up with Apollyon. Okay? And at this time, the devil didn't rebel yet. Okay? The devil was the archangel over the angels that are stationed to guard Eden. So basically they were stationed in Eden to guard it, because, like, I believe there's gateways to it. And then the flaming sword that surrounds it is actually the magma that surrounds the inner core of the earth. All right? And then within the inner core are the compartments which houses the souls of the dead. Okay? So because the job that the devil had in the beginning, he was the angel of death. All right? So when people would die, him and his angels would go get their spirit, their soul, bring it to a specific compartment within the inner core, which, like I said in the past video, the inner core is like a gigantic battery storing the energy of the dead people. Okay? But they're separated into 4 different compartments within the inner core. The saints are in one compartment. The ones who never had the opportunity to know the Messiah are in another compartment. The ones that have already been judged as wicked are in another compartment. And I forget what the other compartment is. But anyway, they're separated is my point. And what the devil and his angels, their job was to bring them, after death, to bring them to their specific compartments. And he was stationed in Eden. And they had access to go in and out, no problem, all right? And the demons were afflicting humans. Noah pleaded. The Almighty decided to lock the demons with Apollyon. When this occurred, the devil, Gog, went to the Almighty and pleaded with him to have some of the demons to assist him in his job. Because if you think about it, humans are getting more populated, and the devil wanted help with his work, all right? And the Almighty agreed and allowed him to have 10% of the demons, okay? So he had control over the demons, 10% of them. The other 90% were locked in the abyss with Apollyon, the antichrist, the original rebel, okay? Now, during the division of the nations, the Almighty also appointed the devil and his angels as supervisors over the nations. Okay? Guardian angels over the nations. Princes over the nations. So they are the principalities. Okay? With the exception of Israel. The 4 angels of the altar are the 4 princes over the camps of Israel. Okay? Because Noah loved Shem, and it was Shem's seed who became Israel. Alright? So the Almighty has his 4 special angels over the camps of Israel, but the devil and his angels, because they were originally still holy angels at that point, they were made to be princes over the other nations. All right? Now, this is approximately at 2600, 2500 BC, right around in there, is when the separation of nations occurred, and the Almighty placed the devil and his angels as princes over the nations. Suppose they were supposed to lead them in righteousness, justice, sound judgments, etc. No, how performing the law properly is what they were supposed to do, with the exception of the Sabbath. Only ancient Israel was taught the Sabbath, right? But anyway, what happened was during them 500 years, from 2500 BC to about 2000 BC, the devil was enjoying his job too much. And we see that in Ezekiel 28 when it talks about when the devil got stripped of his glory, right? Because at this time, the devil is still an angel, the angel of death. That's his job, to bring the souls to their compartments. He was stationed in Eden, but what happened was he was enjoying the violence, the conquest, the blood, etc., etc. He was enjoying it too much, and that's when iniquity was found in him. When iniquity was found from him, that's when he got stripped of the glory. Okay, and this was at the height of Tyr. So we have an estimation of when it occurred, which was approximately 2000 BC, was the height of Tyr and Sidon. Right? So at that point in time is when the devil and his angels got stripped of their glory, meaning they got made into flesh, banned from Eden. Okay? Kicked out of Eden. Now, when this occurred, I believe this is an ancient sculpture of what the devil and his angels were transformed into. Okay. And the modern day rendition would look like this. Okay. And then these are either like biological robots that house the 10% of the demons. They're able to go into these bodies. But anyway, there's the little ones who are like 4 to 5 foot tall, and then the big ones who are the leaders of the ships, in reference to the alien abduction stories, which I believe to be true, which we'll get into a little later. But anyway, they were stripped of the glory and put into flesh, and I believe this is what they were forced to look like. And when you read Ezekiel 28, the Almighty says that he was made to be a terror, and that the kings would see him. And I believe it specifies the kings because he only reveals himself to the rulers that give him allegiance. He actually reveals his true nature to them. But his appearance, because before that, the Almighty says that he was very beautiful. The Almighty made him very beautiful and full of knowledge and wisdom. But once he got stripped of the glory, the Almighty made him ugly, terrifying. All right? And that is a main idea that you must have in perspective to understand what's going on, is that when humans rebelled, when the original Antichrist rebelled, when the 200 rebelled, and when the devil and his angels rebelled, the result is stripped of the glory and made into flesh, meaning the devil can't just go to and fro like the holy angels anymore. He uses technology, advanced technology, because he is in the flesh. He cannot manipulate energy the way holy angels can. He can't do that anymore. He hasn't been able to do it. Everything he does is via technology now, which we'll get into a little later. But anyway, so now the scripture tells us that it's 7 heads and 10 horns, but we know that the 7 heads are the 7 leaders of the 200 fallen ones, the ones that actually taught humanity advanced knowledge. So 7 is actually a representation of the 200, and my point in saying that is that when it says the 10 horns, we don't know if it's just 10 or if it's 100 or if it's thousands or hundreds of thousands. We don't know how many. But what we do know is that the devil, the angel of death, Gog, is the archangel over them, the leader. All right? And that they've been basically playing a game of Risk for thousands of years, leading their people to try to conquer the world and enslave humanity. Okay? That's the ultimate goal, is to enslave all of humanity, because they view humanity as inferior, made from the earth, where they are come from heaven. Okay? All right. Like I said. All right. Yes, and then when we see the ancient myths about the original gods descending into the abyss, being replaced by newer gods, that's actually the fallen ones being locked up, and then the devil and his angels eventually taking their place by rebelling. Okay. All right, so around 2000 BC is when the devil and his angels get stripped of their glory. All right. And now that they are stripped of their glory, I believe that they realize, or I don't know exactly what they think, but their goal is to take New Jerusalem by force. Okay? And they believe that they have to enslave humanity to be able to better execute the war. Because if they have a humanity that's half for them and half against them, then they would be fighting 2 wars. One against humanity and one against the holy angels. So what they need to do is they need to consolidate power here on earth and enslave humanity. All right? And that's what they've been working towards for 3,000 years. Okay? Because yes, they are highly advanced in knowledge compared to us, but no, they are not perfect. And they've been evolving and fine-tuning everything for 3,000 years. Okay? Now, with that being said, when you put it into a perspective, is that humans, within 70 years, went from horse and wagon into going to the moon. Now, take that perspective, and then you have entities that are in flesh, yes, but they're much advanced in knowledge than us, and they've been around on earth in the flesh for 3,000 years. Imagine what they have accomplished, okay? And I'm saying that is because I believe that they basically made a hidden empire with advanced technology, and that's why they can go back and forth to certain places in space. They may have a couple stations, a couple places where they go in space that they're building in anticipation for this final event, okay? Because, like I said in past videos, it seems to me as though the Almighty seizes the angel, or excuse me, Gog and his angels from the north parts of space and then throws them down to earth via the war in heaven. So it sounds to me like they have some type of base or bases in space somewhere. And when you understand how far we had advanced in a measly 70 years, it's not hard to believe that they could have done all this within 3,000 years. It's actually very easy to believe. Okay. So they have this advanced technology, extremely advanced, all right? What we would refer to as aliens and spaceships and UFOs and all that stuff. All right, it's actually them. Now, another thing to understand is that they are also leading the nations to do their bidding, okay? And as the scripture says, they reveal themselves to the kings, all right? Now, from 2000 BC until about the time of the Roman Empire, they were basically trying to enslave humanity via force, boots on the ground, all right? But like I said, they're advancing, they're learning from their mistakes. Now, at approximately around approximately 600 AD or so, I think they realized enslaving humanity via boots on the ground is too complicated, and they decided to use a principle in scripture to enslave humanity, which is Proverbs 22:7. The borrower is slave to the lender, okay? And this is when the Roman Empire morphed into the Vatican. The Roman Empire actually really didn't fall, it morphed. And it morphed into the Vatican and the Holy Roman Empire, all right? And what they did during this time is they basically became the first central bank, meaning the Vatican was lending money to kingdoms, and in return the kingdoms would do their bidding. And that's how the principle works. And then, as time went on, banking families emerged, and they all basically gave their allegiance to the Vatican. Okay, we got the Doge of Venice in the 700s, the Medicis in the 1200s, the Rothschilds in the 1700s, etc. But they all basically gave their allegiance to the Vatican. All right, and a modern way to tell this is that when you see heads of state going to visit the Pope, they bow to him or they kiss his ring, all right, which is a sign of that they obey the hierarchy, because the enemy uses a strict hierarchy, all right. So a main point to understand is that they adhere to a hierarchy with Satan, Gog at the helm, right? And they've been using the Vatican as their main human organization of control since they had evolved from using force to using finance, right? And the kiss of the ring is the sign that they are adhere to the hierarchy, okay? And if you notice, President Trump did not give the Pope that type of respect, right? Now, the modern day organizations that are used to control everything is the Western central bank system, right? Which I believe still ultimately kiss the ring of the Vatican, right? But they're kind of, because they know that they're not in charge, that ultimately Satan, Gog, is in charge. So they really don't care who is in charge down here, that they know they are in allegiance with the 10 horns, okay? And they basically have control of the whole world because they have lended money to the whole world. Thus, all nations are their slaves, with the nation's people as their slaves, okay? And currently there are only 3 countries in the world who do not have a Western central bank, and that's Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. Okay, Russia has a central bank, but they seized control of it under Putin and nationalized it. And this is the reason why we always hear Russia, 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 because they went against this. They went against the system under Putin a couple years ago, and ultimately there was supposed to be a war against Russia if Hillary Clinton would have won, like she was supposed to, and they would have forced Russia into compliance with the war, and then also brought about a world government from the war, which is their goal, to bring about a world government to enslave humanity under one control. However, President Trump won. The end-time Elijah, the end-time anointed leader, he won, all right? And another thing to understand is that they basically have extreme control over so many things. One of them is media, right? They basically control 90% of media. You have to say what they want you to say, otherwise you don't have a job, period. And this is why when you go from ABC to NBC to CBS to MSNBC and even Fox or whatever, there's very little difference to what they're saying. They even use the same buzzwords, right? And it's because it's propaganda. It's not news, it's propaganda. All right? Now, what's been occurring since 2016 is that the roadblocks needed to be removed for the coming of the Messiah, all right? And that's the preparing the way, which is what the end-time Elijah is anointed to do, okay? To remove the roadblocks. Because right now, or at least prior to 2016, 2017, 2016, 2018, the enemy had nearly complete control of the world. All right? And if Hillary would have won like she was supposed to, they would have brought about World War III, and then after that, they would have had complete control. And it would have been game over for humanity. However, the anointed ruler won, and President Trump and his inner circle have dismantled the shadow power structure, shined the light on their corruption, and have backed them into a corner. Thus, they virtually removed everything that Satan and Gog had been setting up for 3,000 years they virtually removed within 3 years. So this fact alone is clear proof that the Almighty is leading President Trump by his right hand, which I believe is basically the bow, which is Michael. All right. That's pretty hard to wrap your mind around, but it's what's occurring. And the roadblocks had to be removed, and a foundation had to be laid. Because once the Messiah begins his coming process, things are going to happen lightning fast. And for an example, like, people who were so disgusted with the corruption and the lack of justice, the two different justices, one for the commoner and one for the elites, that when President Trump got elected, we wanted to see people behind bars immediately, and that's just not how things work. All right? They're doing it properly. They're being transparent. They're doing the proper investigations. They're educating the masses, because before he got elected, the masses were extremely dumbed down and controlled by the propaganda. But since these past 3 years, they've been shining the light on corruption, dripping out information, showing people how wicked and corrupt the system and the people that are in charge of the system is. It's waking the masses up. And even, no matter what, 30%, about 30% of people will never, come to the good side. It's just the way it is. But even they at least have it in the back of their mind because of the information that's been released. If President Trump was never elected, that information wouldn't have been released. Hillary Clinton would not have shined the light and released all the information, etc., etc. So my point is that there had to be a proper process, that it couldn't be all just a big slap in the face. 1 minute no justice, next minute everybody's behind bars. All right, this 3-4 year process is waking the masses up. So when it's time for the seals to open up, I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with the voice of thunder, "I come." So when it's time to crack that seal open, when he gets his crown, because the elders are there with him, his kingdom has begun. And when he cracks open this first seal and begins his coming process, when his arrow hits earth, the bull, the red bull, it's not a coincidence that the one behind the investigations for the crimes, his nickname is the Bull, John the Bull Durham. It's not a coincidence, all right? When the time comes, the foundation's going to be laid, the roadblocks are going to be removed, and the bull is going to hit with raging force. And that's when we're going to see justice on a mass scale, all right? And then when it's time for the transfer of wealth, because that's what the third seal is. The black horse is, it points back to the time of Elisha, when there was a severe famine, and it was such a famine that they were willing to eat their children, because that woman was ready to eat, cut up her child just to share it with people, all right, to eat. So that was giving us an idea of how severe the famine was. But then, in a moment, one day, they went from severe famine into being a humongous transfer of wealth, of being fed and having gold and silver and weapons, etc. from the, it would have been the ancient Armenians, I believe it was, when they were fighting against Israel at the time. They were camped, about to attack Israel, but the Almighty sent the angels, holy angels among them, and they got scared, left all their wealth in their camp. And then the ancient Israelites were able to get it without lifting a finger. That's what's going to happen with the third seal. There's going to be this massive transfer of wealth from the wicked to the righteous, which I believe is when President Trump and his inner circle transition the world from the fiat system onto a gold-backed type of a system. And more than likely, they're probably going to seize the assets of the wicked because of their crimes against humanity, and then it's going to be given to the people, whether directly to the people or to the governments of the people. But it's going to be a humongous transfer of wealth. And this is what I believe when Elijah is empowered to run super fast. I believe that's what's going to happen after the removal of the wise virgins, that it's going to happen real fast. And then the final one is when ultimately the devil and his angels, they had virtually worldwide control, but ultimately they are going to be backed into the Middle East and cornered into the Middle East, and that's the jurisdiction that they're allowed. So they're backed into the Middle East, they're backed into a corner, and then they're given jurisdiction over that area for the end time, which is a couple years, all right? But prior to that, they basically had worldwide control. And then this, in the Middle East, within that territory that they have jurisdiction, that's where the fifth seal's martyrs are going to be killed, all right, for testifying on behalf of the Messiah. Because they've been given jurisdiction over that area, they are allowed to do that. But when they do that, the Almighty comes, or excuse me, well, yes, the sixth seal occurs immediately after the fifth seal. The fifth seal is the first tribulation, which is the killing of the fifth seal martyrs because of their faith in the Messiah. And then it says immediately after that point is the sixth seal, which is the return of the Father and Son in New Jerusalem. And that is when the last trump is sounded, because the last trump is actually a military preparation. It's the final preparation before the war in heaven. The Messiah is gathering up all of his people into New Jerusalem before he conducts the war in heaven. And then once they're all gathered into New Jerusalem, he commences the war in heaven, and the devil and his angels and his armies are seized and thrown down to earth. They no longer can, their technology is eliminated. All right? And they're thrown down to earth. They no longer have their ability to be in heaven, because in space, because now New Jerusalem is there, and the Almighty will not tolerate evil in His presence. So it has to be dealt with, and it's dealt with via the war in heaven, and then they're thrown to the earth. Now, the reasoning for the alien abductions is because I personally believe they made a deal with the upper echelon, the shadow controllers of humanity, that they want to experiment on humanity, and they'll give the rulers advanced technology, which is why we've seen humanity go from horse and buggy to going to the moon within 70 years. And I believe that occurred at the birth. It really got a lot of steam, because when the enemy seen Israel born in a day, they knew that that was the birth of the final generation, or at least they had an idea that time is running out. So that's when they beefed up their experimentations, okay? And I personally believe that they made a pact, a covenant, an agreement, whatever you want to speak, a contract with the leaders of humanity that, don't interfere with us and our experimentations, and we'll give you advanced knowledge. And that's what's been going on since the 40s, okay? And when you research the alien abductions, you can see that they're progressing. From the 60s until the present day, they're progressing. And the whole goal of the experimentations is to splice humans with their DNA, to make them stronger for the war, okay? Now, of course, that's all going to come to an end when they get tossed out of space, but they already have the understanding of how to do it, because they've been practicing since the 40s, maybe even longer, all right? And when you listen to all the abduction stories, they almost are all identical, and they talk about that there's minions that do the labor that are small, 4 or 5 feet tall, 3 feet tall, whatever, and then there's leaders of the ships, so to speak, and they're big, and they look kind of like reptilians, which I showed you. I believe these are the ancient, right here, these are the ancient sculptures of them. And this is like a modern drawing, modern rendition of the leaders here on the left, and the minions here on the right, which I personally think that these, once they got their technology up and running, they were able to make these to house the demon spirits within these like cyborg type of bodies, okay? And when you understand that, it's easy to see that when it says in scripture the devil comes disguised as an angel of light, meaning he can't change into an angel of light, he comes disguised. Because lots of people believe that they can shapeshift, and I don't believe that. I believe it's technology. They have technology of like hologram type technology, where they are able to have a hologram over top of them that makes them look like holy angels, or at least, a good looking human that would be appealing to people, all right? But I don't believe that that's the form he came when he tempted the Messiah in the desert. The Messiah seen him for what he was, okay? But it talks about that he comes disguised. And I also believe that they have strong telepathy and maybe even technology that is able to hack into humans' minds, but they aren't allowed to do it to people who are strong with the holy energy, the Holy Spirit. And I believe this is why it says that he, like a roaring lion, goes about seeking whom he may destroy. And even when you look at the ancient word for destroy, it talks about, or I should say, when you look at the ancient term for fiery darts, it sounds like needles. Okay? Meaning, if you have the Holy Spirit protecting you, you won't get hit by the alien abductions that are meant to destroy. Okay? And what they're doing is they are experimenting on people. Some of them they kill. Some of them they bring back. But when you look at all the unexplained disappearances out there, you know that a lot have been killed. And who knows how many, how long it's been going on, and how many is actually the true toll. But the whole agenda is the DNA splicing, which is eventually the mark. Okay? That's what this whole abduction ambition is all about, the alien abductions. It's all about fine-tuning their DNA splicing technology. So when it's time to set up the mark, they're ready to roll it right out. They don't have to research it. They're ready to roll it right out. However, even though all of their research, humans still don't accept it well. And that's exactly what Daniel was saying when he said the iron and clay, the seed of the beast will mingle with the seed of men, but it won't take, just like iron and clay don't mix. That's what he's explaining, is that the DNA won't mix well with the humans when they take the mark. And that's what we see in the first bowl. They get these malignant sores on them because their bodies are rejecting the alien, the DNA of Apollyon. Okay? So, let's go back to here. Now, in the final stand, let's see. Okay, yep. So this final stand, which Daniel 12 talks about Michael taking a final stand. This final stand is the process of the Messiah putting his enemies under his feet. Okay? Like I said, the first seal is the Messiah with the bow in his hand, and the bow's empty because he already fired out the arrows. The bow is Michael, and the arrows are the other three angels of the altar, angels of the presence. Okay, and we can know that via Deuteronomy 32:23 to 25. When the Almighty talks about his arrows, and when you see his arrows, they are the three seals, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and what he's actually doing is this is the final cleansing process. That's what this is all about, cleansing evil. Because, like we said in the beginning, the word of the Almighty is law, because he created everything. So what he says is law. The first ones to violate the law was the Apollyon, the antichrist. And the Almighty puts all of the sin the crime on him. Yes, if we don't do what we're supposed to, we will have the same fate as him, but he doesn't put the blame on us, he puts the blame on him. And this past 6,000 years is a cleansing process of what he birthed when he acted upon his jealousy. All right? And when the Messiah comes, when he gets his kingdom, when he gets crowned, which hasn't happened yet because he needs the wise virgins there, he needs part of his kingdom there to begin his being king. What's the point of having a kingdom if you don't have, if I should say, what's the point of being king if you don't have a kingdom? So I believe the wise virgins need to be there with him before he gets crowned. That's what we're waiting on, right? His crowning. And when he gets that, he immediately starts the conquest. And it's for the Father, because he gives it back to the Father. All right? Now, when we see in Revelation 10, when we see his feet on top of the earth and on top of the sea, that's a picture of him putting his enemies under his feet, which is the complete victory. And the victory is accomplished by the 7 peals of thunder, which are the weapons the Almighty uses from New Jerusalem to destroy the enemy. So in John 19:30, when he's on the cross and says, "It is finished," he's talking about the sin of the world was dealt with, the Lamb of the Almighty who taketh away the sin of the world. And then when he says it again in Revelation 16:17, "It is finished," he's talking about the sin that came from heaven is dealt with, which is why Daniel 9, I think it's around 24, when Gabriel's given Daniel the prophecy, he's talking about making an end to sin. See, sin is not ended until the one who brought it about is dealt with, and that's dealt with at the end when the Messiah comes down for the war, the great day, kills everything because it's all wicked, and then the fallen ones are thrown into the burning fire. They're dealt with. Okay? So the 7,000-year process is about cleansing the universe from the first violation of law that was brought about by Apollyon. So when the Messiah says, "Behold, I am making all things new," what he's saying is I'm cleaning heaven and earth from the violation of the law, from lawlessness, from evil. All right? And when they're released after the 70 generations, it all occurs in one day. When New Jerusalem is here and the devil and his angels are thrown down and his armies are thrown down, it all happens within one day. At the same time, Apollyon and his minions come out from the abyss. All right, and when you read the description of them, it looks just like him. Right here, the wings, hair of women. It doesn't show his teeth, but his mouth is closed. The body of a horse, and the scorpion tail. All right, and then 5 months after that, the rest of the fallen ones are released, and the beast of the sea is their conquest of humanity, because Earth is going to be virtually destroyed at that point. The sixth seal destroys many things, and then the first 2 trumpets completely annihilate North, South, and Central America and the Pacific and everything that's touching it. And then the 6th trumpet, the 200 fallen ones go out and destroy everything outside of the Middle East. So the only thing left during the mark, at the time of the mark, is the Middle East. Everything else is not habitable. And like I said, the fallen ones view humans as inferior, so first they conquer them. The only thing standing in their way is the 144,000. Then after the 144,000 are done their testimony, they give themselves up, just like the Messiah did, and the beasts kill them as the first ones to refuse the mark. So they set the example, all right? And this is at the end of the first half of the week. And then the beasts set up the mark. 144,000 are the first to refuse. The mark is the DNA splicing of the Apollyon's DNA into humans to make them like him, or I should say hybrids, similar to him, way stronger than regular humans. Okay, and we could see this by the fact that they're getting hit with 100-pound balls of hail from New Jerusalem, and they're not dying. All right, a human would be crushed like an ant, but they're actually enduring it. So they're obviously engineered to be better, way stronger than the average human. And then a little bit after the mark is set up, within 45 days, whoever refuses it is killed. And that's the final separation of human flesh. That is actually the end of human flesh, because flesh cannot inherit the kingdom, so there are no survivors. I know most of Christianity think they're survivors, but there are no survivors. After the mark is set up, either you take it and you're no longer human, you become a hybrid, or you refuse it and you're killed and then raptured up to New Jerusalem. And actually the 7 churches are 7 portions of the body, and the body is not completed until the final portion, the heel, is taken up. And that's, the heel is, where do I have it? The heel is actually, was prophesied in Genesis 3, that he would be allowed to bruise the heel. And it's not talking about a person's heel, it's talking about the hind part of the body, the final part of the body, which is the 144,000 leading new believers during the time of the wrath. The enemy is authorized to hurt them, which is when they set up the mark and kill everyone who refuses it. Okay, and then they have 3 years to prepare for the war of the great day. But when the Messiah comes down, he kills everything, and the beasts get thrown into the burning fire, and the devil and his angels get thrown into the abyss, into prison, because they didn't have any time in prison yet, so they got to have their prison time before they're completely dealt with at the end of the 1,000 years. Okay, so that's the narrative I have for the unseen war that's going on. And I'm sure I missed some stuff, but that should be a good rough draft for you to further investigate. And hopefully in a short time I'll have the 7,000 year timeline out, because time is very short, and hopefully I'm right about the near open door. We'll see what happens. Of course, I don't want to, put any false hope out there, but I'm not telling you guys to do anything drastic other than prepare, and I'm going to start fasting and praying in preparation. And I welcome you to join me, but I am human and I may have it wrong, but I hope I'm right. And I'll share it with you in the next video. And until then, take care, and may the will of the Almighty be done. In the name of His only begotten Son, YaHushuWaH.